Hi, everybody. My name is Ingrid Sandberg. I work for the Center for Technology and Training. We serve as Michigan's LTAP office, which is the uh, Local Technical Assistance Program. I have done a Bridge QC/QA program, which hopefully you attended. If you didn't, we'll send the recording to you with a link to this recording and these handouts. I had promised in that session to give you some handouts to maybe help you with your QC/QA process. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about what QC and QA are here, but I am going to walk you through how to use these handouts to help you improve your process. So this first handout is a habit analysis. There's a whole bunch of potential things that you might be doing, and the idea is to go through and kind of check off whether this is something that affects you every single day, or maybe it only affects you a little bit more infrequently. I would encourage you, this is not a super comprehensive list, but hopefully it will get you thinking a little bit. I would encourage you to go through these worksheets if you possibly can with another person in your organization, a QC, QA buddy, maybe somebody that you work closely with, because it can also be helpful to see from another person's perspective, maybe the things that are affecting you and your ability to do QC, QA aren't what are affecting someone else. We're all different. Something that is either annoying to you or a roadblock for you might not be for somebody else, and you might learn some tips and tricks that way. If you can possibly do it, it'd be awesome if you could go through these types of sheets with your whole organization, but I realize that that's a little bit of a big ask, but at least doing it with another person can give you that other perspective. So you want to go through this sheet, kind of check off and see, how often are these things affecting me? And then once you've completed that worksheet and kind of got your brain thinking about things, then move on to this second worksheet where you're going to think about kind of your own personal habits. And they can be good or bad habits. Maybe there's something that you're really good at doing in terms of QC, QA, and you're really consistent with it. Write that down. Maybe there are some other things that you need to improve on a little bit. You want to look at this both from your personal QC, QA habits, as well as your habits as an organization, which can vary. If you are in an organization that has many offices, it can be helpful to do this kind of exercise within each office, because one office might have solved a problem that you're having and you don't know. Sometimes those kind of inner workings, they don't always get shared throughout a whole organization. So you want to go through this worksheet and kind of break down what are some of my own habits, what are some of the habits that we have in this organization, in this workplace, in this office, etc. And consider those things, and then go back and look at at the very bottom of this worksheet. It says, now consider your lists, that checklist, and then put a check next to the habits that you think could be improved. Put a star next to habits that you think you're good at. And then we're going to move on to this third worksheet where you want to consider the previous worksheet where you thought about what you are doing, what your workplace is doing, and think about the things that need improvement on. And then rank those in terms of the top three that are going to make the biggest impact of the things that you need to improve on. If you improve them, what would make the biggest impact? And then think about in terms of how easy things are to fix. So stop thinking about how much impact they're going to make and think about how easy would they be to fix if you were to fix them, and rank them top three. And then stop thinking about how easy they are or how big of an impact, how urgent is it that we need to fix this, and rank those top three. And then once you've done that, you may see a pattern. Maybe there's a couple of things that are showing up in each of those three columns. If there are, now you know how to prioritize what to start with in terms of improvements. And then, once you have done those improvements, you can go back and look at this to get some more ideas. But this should hopefully help you to prioritize and zero in on what's going to be the thing that if you put the effort into improving is going to be the most easy, the most impactful, and also in terms of urgency for your agency or organization to get finished. I see at the bottom here, we've got notice any overlap. This might be a good place to start. All right, so now that you've maybe narrowed in on something like, hey, this is something that I think we could improve on, and it may not be that hard to fix, and there is some urgency to getting it done. Choose one of those processes to address, and now start thinking, just brain dump some ideas about what would it look like if you improved this process? What might the process be? What kind of problems are there currently with the process that can help you also? You don't necessarily have to go through this sheet, linearly. You can jump around on this one, and I encourage you to do it. Like, just get all of those good ideas out and onto some paper. I also kind of encourage you to do this, print these sheets out and do this by hand. I think that the act of writing stuff down, um, instead of typing it out, it uses a little bit different part of your brain. And I think that in this case can be helpful to really get yourself in a different headspace to think about new ideas. So you want to think about, what would this look like if it was good? What are some of the problems that we're currently having? What steps maybe can we take to improve the process? Maybe there's something really easy. For example, we talked a little bit about in the QCQR webinar or QCQA webinar, we talked a little bit about like, hey, if people don't all have their digital signatures and their initials in an easy to use format, that's a great place to start. Start with that. Make sure that everybody across your organization can sign and initial things digitally. That's going to make things way easier, especially if you're passing documents back and forth. And then you also want to think about who's going to be responsible. If you say, hey, everybody's got to have that done by X date, who's going to be the person that follows up with, the stragglers and make sure that they have gotten that done? And then what are some potential roadblocks for implementing these changes? And what are some potential solutions for those roadblocks? So again, hey, it's really hard for people to digitally sign stuff because they don't have their initials and their signatures in Adobe, or maybe you're having issues with whatever signature information you're using. Are there things that we can do? Maybe it's hey, we need IT to help us a little bit, or maybe it's somebody, we need all of the signatures to be in blue ink or black ink or whatever, and that is a struggle. They're really grainy. Maybe you can do some things to make this work out a little bit better, but think about those things. So then you want to move on to our next steps worksheet. So from that brain dump and that habit analysis, you've identified some things you think you can improve on, and you've come up with maybe what some of the problems are, and maybe some of the solutions, what it would look like if it was working well. You want to think about, what's our goal? Let's set a specific goal for this. You want that goal to be really clear and make sure that it does make sense for your organization as a whole. And then you want to think about, how are we going to measure that goal in terms of success? Does this mean a certain percentage of improvement? Does this mean 100% compliance? What does it mean to you for this to be successful? And then you want to think about, what's your timeline? How long are you going to give people to start implementing this before, maybe there are consequences to that, or maybe there's you give people, hey, we're going to give you X amount of time. We're going to do some random audits at that point to see how we're doing in terms of compliance. You want to make sure that that is a transparent process and people kind of know what's going on. And then you also want to make sure that this has been assigned, the responsibility for either implementing this or checking compliance, that this has been assigned to a specific person and that they understand what their role is going to be in this. Again, if the best of intentions aren't going to be accomplished if we don't have somebody who is specifically tasked with making it happen, right? So having that assignment of responsibility is also a crucial point in this whole process. Then we want to look at maybe creating a checklist, right? Checklists can be really helpful so that people don't forget, especially if you have processes that are multi-step or maybe part of the process happens during one portion of the project, and then there's maybe a big gap, and then you continue with that process. Or if you have long stretches between doing final and draft calculations or plans, having some checklists to make sure that everything has been done in accordance with your QCQA policy can really be helpful. So thinking about that in terms of a checklist, going through the process, whatever that habit or process that you identified, hey, we need to improve this thing, try and make a checklist for what are the steps of that process, and maybe some sub steps. Like, try and get into the most detail you possibly can with this, and then that way you can create something that is going to be helpful for folks and useful for folks, and hopefully flexible for folks. We'll talk about that in just a minute here, but making sure that you're identifying all the steps and maybe some sub steps within that. And this, again, is one of those times when it's really helpful to have another person to bounce this idea around, like, because you might not identify a crucial step because maybe it's not something that you regularly do. You get it to the document or the plans or whatever to a certain point, and then somebody else does part of the process. It's not really in your it's not going to be top of mind for you. All right. So once you kind of got that checklist review, you want to, what I would really encourage is, for if you are working with a partner, each of you make your own checklist and then swap and see what was on theirs that wasn't on mine, and vice versa. Once you kind of have combined something that you like, I think this is a good checklist for our process. You want to talk about who's going to be in charge of this list, because as you know, things change. New software comes out, software changes, people move around within the company or the agency, people retire. Who's going to be in charge of this list when changes happen? Because the list needs to be a living document. There's no possible way that you can make a QC/QA checklist in January of 2025 that is going to be 100% relevant in January of 2030. It's just not possible. So who's going to be in charge of making those changes? The other thing too is that you might make this list and you are like, hey, I've maybe you used it personally a little bit before you give it to other people. But as soon as you give it to more people, they're going to find issues with it, which is a good thing. You want that because you want this process to be as true to how people are doing the work as possible. So when they find those issues, there might be some edits and improvements you can make to the list. So who's going to do that? You want to identify that. And then you also want to think about, when should this list be used? Maybe this is going to be really good for very large projects that have a lot of moving pieces, and you need to have that rigidity of having a checklist, but maybe it isn't as applicable to smaller projects, or maybe vice versa. Maybe the smaller projects are the ones where you're like, we really don't want to miss anything. Let's make sure that all of our ducks are in a row. But a checklist, ideally, you can have some flexibility with it, where you say, if a project is more than X, then you can use this checklist, but you can disregard, subsection B or whatever. And if it's a smaller project, maybe you are using skip to subsection C for projects that are under maybe a dollar amount, or maybe under a particular size, etc. But you want to make sure that all of that is easily conveyed to someone who's new to using the checklist, so they understand when should it be used, when shouldn't it be used. And then the last piece is, again, how are you going to evaluate compliance with using this checklist? Are you going to do some random audits? Is it going to be maybe at the end of a project closeout or something? Somebody else checks to see that this has been filled out. What kinds of ideas can you come up with that are going to be helpful in terms of that? And then we're going to probably have some naysayers. There's going to be somebody, even if they are 100% on board with the spirit of this, you're going to have folks who are like, I don't have the time, or we don't have the budget for this, etc. So you want to think about, again, what we talked about this in the workshop, some of the consequences for poorly thought out and poorly implemented QC/QA. You also want to talk about some of the benefits. What are some of the benefits of doing a good job with QC/QA, which we talked about in the workshop? And so then when you run into folks who have those concerns, which they can be valid concerns about budget, schedule, effort, etc., staffing, what are some of those, think about some of those common things in your agency, your organization, that you would expect to hear, and how can improving this process save you time, save you effort, save you money, and save your reputation. And there are other tangible benefits to this as well. So then moving forward, in your existing QC/QA process, where do you have the most opportunity for to introduce some change? Is it, maybe you are a project manager and like on my projects going forward, here's what we're going to do. Maybe you're at a higher level and you can say, hey, everybody, this is the new thing. This is what we're doing. Maybe within your office, you can make some changes, but maybe organizational wide, that might take a little bit more effort or time to adopt something. But what can you do right now? And who are some of your advocates? That's one of the other reasons that I advocate having a buddy with you when you go through these worksheets, is because then there's at least two of you now who can say, hey, this is something that we should do, and we've thought it through, and here's something that we can do. I think going through these worksheets, you don't have to do them all at one time, and it might actually be helpful to go through a worksheet and then just kind of let it marinate a little bit, and then come back and do one or two more. But these shouldn't take you hours and hours and hours to do. The intent is for you to be able to move through these fairly quickly. So then what can you do to increase the likelihood of compliance? So that those types of things are, what can we do in terms of making this easy for folks? So increasing that likelihood of compliance is making the tools easy to use, making them easy to access, making them easily accessible in terms of where they are saved, where they are the technology that you're using. All of those pieces are going to increase the likelihood that people are going to be compliant, because if you make a tool hard to use, it's going to be less adopted. So if it's the checklist being a paper checklist is great, but having it something that people can print off, but also something that is an Adobe fillable form, is also going to be helpful. So, that is something that I encourage, is whatever kind of checklist you do, make sure that it is some type of electronic format in addition to something that could be printed out. And then our last piece here is that you need to set some actual goals for yourself, because otherwise, all of the work that you just put into filling out all the rest of those worksheets, it's going to come to nothing. So what can we do to ensure that this actually gets implemented, is to set ourselves some goals. So what is a goal that you might have to improve things within the next month? And then maybe a 6-month goal. Maybe within the next month, you're like, I'm going to try and make this checklist and start using it. Maybe within 6 months, you get other people to start using it as well. And then what about for this is by next year's conference, because I used these when I did the workshop at the Michigan Bridge Conference last year. But what are some things that you could do by next year? And by next January, what could you do? And I would be really curious, and I would really love it if you guys would let me know what some of your goals are. And then especially if you're in an agency where you're not sure that you're going to have a lot of other people who are going to be on board with this, if you need somebody to help you in terms of accountability, I am happy to be your accountability buddy, and you can send me what your goals are, and then I can reach out to you in 6 months and say, hey, how are things going? And not as a you should be doing this, but as a reminder, because I know work takes over, and things, your best intentions sometimes slip to the wayside. So just that mid-year reminder, maybe in July, about, hey, how are things going? Is there anything that I can do to help? Or did you run into any roadblocks? Those types of things. Would you like me to talk to somebody maybe about some of these ideas? I am happy to do any and all of that for you. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me. You can reach out to the ctt@mtu.edu email and just say that you've got a Bridge QC/QA question, and they'll send it on to me, or you can reach out to me directly as well. This will be sent out in an email, and we'll make sure to put my contact information in there as well. So thank you to all of you for both attending the workshop, and if you end up using these worksheets, let me know. Even if you don't want to share what your goals are, just let me know that you went through the worksheets, and let me know what you think. If you have ideas for improvement, I'm all ears. So thank you again so much, and I hope that in 2025 you're able to make your processes better, and maybe save yourself a little bit of time and headache in the process. So thanks again so much, and we will see you later.